Hello, fellow Sublime Text Fanatics. OdatNurd here, and welcome to this live stream where I have pressed the wrong sequence of keys and set the whole thing in motion before I said hello, Sublime Text Fanatics. Well, it's going to be one of those kind of streams, isn't it? Anyway, let's get on with the excitement. We are going to be working on some new features for Sublime for Override Audit version 2.0. I actually managed to release version 2 this week. The culmination of a year's worth of refactoring and testing, although realistically the testing only happened over the last couple of weeks or so in my spare time to coincide with Sublime Text version 3.2. And as a part of this release, you must be using Sublime Text 3.2 or later, or technically build 3197 or later, which is actually the last dev build in the dev series leading up to Sublime Text version 3.2. So people that, like me, that live on the dev stream and not in the stable stream can still use Override Audit version 2 without having to wait for the next dev build to pop up. And what are we actually going to be working on tonight? Well, I actually have a couple of ideas of things to do. But the first one is an issue that I registered with my repository quite some time ago. Do I have a tab here that I have laid out? Yes, I do. It's this one right here. Should override audit check for or report non-override? You'll notice that's April 7th, 2017. And the general gist of that is this. Packet files in an unpacked package folder are considered to be overrides if there is a Sublime package file backing that package, because in that case, the files in the loose package folder will be used in place of the ones in the Sublime package file. But what happens if there are files in that package that aren't part of a Sublime package file? What about those? And there are actually a couple of possible solutions here. One of them, as we can see here, as an admittedly contrived example. What if a package had a Python plugin that implemented one of its commands and you overrode that, so you tweak something, and the author of the package renamed that file and also added new features? Now, when it updates, you're not told that that loose file is sitting there. Because why would override audit tell you it's not actually an override? But it might still cause problems for you. And another situation which came up from a user named Michael, as a matter of fact, I believe I may have linked to it down here. I referenced this. In the bulk diff report does not show new files. This is what prompted me to do this. Michael B. Lyons has a similar situation where he created a default Sublime key map in a package that he intended to create a PR for, and then he expected override audit to tell him that that file was in the package when it wasn't supposed to be, or wasn't override, I should say. And he was surprised when it didn't work. And as a matter of fact, that is another great case for that. So let's go ahead and see if we can work that out. So the first the thing we want to do here is include the ability to find non-overrides in a package. And I think that should be fairly simple. Famous last words. I'm making air quotes as I say that. The next thing we're going to do is we need to update the syntax to be able to support unknown overrides, which is going to be, I think, again, quote unquote, fairly simple. We'll see how that goes. And then we need to update the report generation to also include unknown files, and then update context handlers, because we'll see if I do this and pick override report and we get all of this stuff here. I can right click on one of these and I can see options. I can edit this, I can diff it, I can delete it. And I can also refresh the report. Now, if there was a file in, say, default that wasn't supposed to be in default, or again, as I say, it exists in the unpacked package folder but doesn't exist in default, the Sublime package, you could still edit it if you want. You can't diff it because there's nothing to diff against, so that option should be gone. And you could delete it if you want. And it's not outlined here. In fact, just to show you another example of what we were doing here, if I went to my package folder and went into default and I touched paste from history, and I have to always do this because I do this so infrequently. There we go. If I touched paste from history with a date of 1 year ago, like so, now if I refresh this report, we're going to see two things. We're going to see that little X next to that paste from history right there, which is Sublime Override Audit's way of telling us that this is a file name for an override that has expired. And expired means that this override file is older than the package version of the file that it comes with, which means this file theoretically existed before the default package was updated, say to Sublime Text 3.2. And in that case, whatever I put in that override may be wrong. So the one thing we're going to do is we're going to inject something like this, but with a question mark in place of that X to show that those are unknown overrides. And you'll also notice that now one of the other things I can do here is freshen this override, which means that what it's going to do basically is touch the file to be current. You would do that if you know for a fact, say for example, I went up here to this package in bulk diffed this report, zoomed that out, and I could look at it and say, yeah, my changes are still perfectly fine. I don't need to worry about that. So I could freshen this to touch that file so override audit stops warning me. As long as a package has at least one file of that type, an expired override, then also a package has the freshen expired overrides in the default package. You'll notice the C++ package has no such option, and the HyperHelp package has no such option because there aren't any expired overrides there. You also can't freshen an expired, or you can't freshen an unknown override because it's not going against any file that it needs its timestamp to be updated. I don't think that part would necessarily be a problem because it will only do that when it's expired, and it can only be expired if it exists in the package. But we do have to make sure that when we do it on a package that it doesn't try to do something funky there. I don't think that will be a problem, but that's just something we want to keep in mind. And just as an example of how this works, if I picked freshen, it'll ask me if I want to confirm, do I want to do that? There's a setting you can use if you just want to always blindly do it. And if I say yes, we see that mark goes away. And if we looked in the console, we could also see it saying override audit freshen to default paste from history.py. And if I went back to my terminal and went into the default package and it didn't do it that way, we could see that that now has the current date and time, not that one from a year ago. So that is what we're going to work on here. That's what update the context handlers is. And in the highly unlikely event we manage to get all of that finished, there is another feature we would like, which is to be able to add a context menu entry for reverting an override, which would confirm with you. Again, also allowing you to configure that as an option if you want to be asked to confirm or not. And then it would replace your override with the contents from the upstream package, which is what you might do. And again, this is another thing in the Git repository, but I didn't go ahead and pop that one up that my good friend Keith Hall logged a ways back, in which he does a lot of work for the default syntaxes in Sublime Text. In fact, I believe there was a big C# refactor, not in this last release, but in one prior, where he really cleaned that syntax up, and a few others. Markdown is another syntax he commented on, cleaned up and worked on. His name appears quite a bit in the contributors list. So he needs to keep files overrides there so he can make changes if he needs to, and sometimes he just wants to revert back to the base one while he has code checked out, and then go back to the one from the repository later and things like that. And it was actually this that made me realize that in order to add new context commands, I needed to do the big scary refactor because it was too hard to work on before. So that's what we're going to do. So the first thing we want to do is include the ability to find non-overrides. So let's zoom that back out. Now, all my windows are closed here, primarily because I suppose I can't do that until I have a file open, huh? Maybe I can do it from over here. There we go. I, as a part of the release from version 1.2.11 to version 2, I did two releases. I did a version 1.2.2, which just told people that it was going to be the last version supported by the old build of Sublime Text, and then version 2 dropped that updated the version requirements. And as a part of that, there was a little bit of merging going on, and so I had to close files because it was constantly complaining about syntax files not being there. It was a whole big thing. So let's go ahead and create a branch for this. And what do we actually want to call this thing? We'll call it unknown override detection, like so. And as a completely unrelated change, I'm going to delete that because this was something that I just realized yesterday or the day before that slipped through the merge from version 1.2 to version 2, because one of the things that happened in version 2 was I changed the layout of the package so all of the resources are up in here and they used to be in the top level of the package. So that went a little doolally. So we'll just again throw a comment in here like remove extraneous context menu file. And I will stage that for deletion and commit it. And I'm not going to bother typing out the actual body of the commit messages. I'll go back after the stream and fill those in, but that'll just remind me what exactly was going on there. And that's not really part of unknown override audit, unknown detection, but what can you do? Now, in my normal mode of operation, when I'm working on this, I would have override audit open, the top level file open here. I also like to keep the packages thing open over here, and sometimes I also open utils and the other ones, but packages is the one we're going to be working on the most. Maybe I'll throw this one down here because every time I save this file, it'll cause the entire plugin to be reloaded, just in case we get a little funked out by that. And if I look in the source for commands, there should be something here called override report, which is going to be the bulk of what we're trying to do here. Now we'll go ahead and close this sidebar for just now. And perhaps also note that tonight's live stream is unofficially sponsored by whatever kind of coffee I ground this morning. I have several different kinds. That has been lovingly crafted by the Keurig that I bought at Costco, seasoned with some cream of some variety. I believe it is caramel, and sweetened with Splenda, because you can get roughly 137 million pounds of it for a nickel at Costco. I suppose in many regards that's just a commercial for Costco. We do a lot of shopping at Costco. All right. Now, we'll zoom this up first. Now, quote unquote, this probably somewhat easy to do. I don't know if it makes sense to discuss this, but I think I may have talked about this in another stream, but I'll just cover it very briefly here, that the package file set class is a specific variation on a mutable set, which is made to be case insensitive as far as the content of the set is concerned. And that's because Unix uses a case-sensitive file system, Windows doesn't use a case-sensitive file system, and Mac OS might use a case-sensitive file system. And I'm going to apologize right now if I use the word case-sensitive when I mean to say case-insensitive, because I sometimes, when I'm speaking, flip that around. I did that in something I recorded the other day, and it was driving me absolutely bonkers. But the idea there is we want this code to work both on systems where the file system is case sensitive and ones where it's not, because it, perhaps little bit of an unknown fact, if you created a package named default all uppercase under Linux, it would be treated as a separate package. Under macOS and Windows, it won't, and it'll merge together. There's a little bit of weirdness there. It causes some sorts of problems in some cases, but we want to keep that out. So that's what package file set is for. But otherwise, it's just a set. Override diff result is just something that gets passed out of a diff operation, which contains the actual result of the diff for display. Nothing exciting there. The real meat of this whole operation is a package info class, which stores all of the information about one particular package, which it gets by, oh, dog's being a little excited here, which it gets by scanning the packages folder, the installed packages folder, and the shipped packages folder to find package files and other files. And it also can get the contents of a package, as we can see, and it has a list of overrides and expired overrides. Those are sort of lazy type operations. It doesn't fetch that information unless you specifically ask for it, like for example, package contents, if I'm remembering the variables correctly. You don't always need to know the package contents, but the first thing you do that requires package contents, it grabs it and caches it, and then every other time it just uses it, and it assumes as long as this package info structure exists, that package is still the same. Now that package may be changing on disk, but we got bigger problems to deal with than someone that's running a command while simultaneously fiddling a package in the background. They deserve all of the hassle they get when that happens. So somewheres down here in the bin of this, get package directory contents will get the list of all of the files that exist inside of a particular package directory. This one gets all of the files out of a actual package, and you'll notice it stores that in package content when you ask for the contents of the package, or you can also ask for packed package contents as well. Package contents actually pulls it out of the package directory. Otherwise, it gets it out of the Sublime package folder. So this is the generic one. That one gets the package directory contents, which is what this does. This one does this one. The code's all sort of split out. So when you get the package contents for something, you can ask for the contents of a directory. You can ask for the contents of a Sublime package file. Either way, you return the result. And you'll notice that if you've asked for it previously, you just get the same result back. So it doesn't have to do all of this work. Now, if you want override contents, you do that. Now, somewheres around here, here's some tests. Does this possibly have overrides? It can't have overrides unless there's a package file and it's unpacked, because something that's just a package file and something that is just unpacked can't generally be an override, with the exception of the notion, which not many people know, that is, if you put a Sublime package file in installed packages, that's the same as one of the packages that ships with Sublime. For example, python.sublime package ships with Sublime in a special directory alongside the binary. If you put a package with the exact same name in installed packages, that will override the shipped version, and it will use that one instead. You could use that to replace an entire package wholesale. We refer to that as a complex override here, and a simple override is just checking to see if it's possible for you to have an override file, which is the standard one. There's getting some zip info. So here we are asking for override files, which is the list of overridden files for this package, and a given override type, the list may be empty. So if this doesn't have possible overrides, if it's not possible for this to have any overrides, then it can just go ahead and return an empty set right now. If simple is in Sublime dot and self overrides, then it wants to return that. See, the overrides here is a dictionary that's keyed on true and false. So if you asked for simple overrides and you had previously gotten them, then they'll be returned. Same as that other caching. And then if this is not simple, it needs to check for things based on the actual shipped and installed package contents, but otherwise it wants to use package and unpacked package contents. Now, the thought occurs that if we want some sort of handler for unknown overrides or baseless overrides or whatever we want to call this particular thing. I sort of put out a call on the unofficial Discord this morning. Extra for extraneous files was also something that was spat out. That could happen here in override files where we could have a parameter that we could ask for it. I don't know because I don't technically consider them overrides, which is the whole problem we're trying to solve here. So then my druthers is to actually do that the other way, and which would be to say def, well, not override files, but unknown overrides, which is sort of a weaselly way to mention that, right? And we can return package file set, just as an example of what it could do. Get the list of files that exist in the unpacked package, but not in the packed package, if any. This implies, this has to be documented. I can't leave this part out because this is the sort of thing that guides me in what I'm doing. So this wants to get the list of files that exist in the unpacked package, but not in the packed package, if there is any. This implies that the override type is, gonna have to fix that. Simple. And we'll return an empty set if there are no such files. So one thing we would then need is our dictionary to cache this in. Now that's storing it in overrides. So if we scooped way back up to here, we might say self.unknown overrides is equal to, well, does that actually have to be a dict? I'm not entirely sure why that one's a dict for this one, to be perfectly honest. We'll just do that for now and we'll see. Oh yeah, I think it had to be because it's based on the package name. If simple is in self-expired, oh, I see. So yeah, this one doesn't need to be because it implies simple. Boy, timestamp is, can I not type or what, huh? Oh, now that comment doesn't work. There. One more. So we'll say none for that one. So what would we actually say here? We might say if not self.has possible overrides true. It's only possible for there to be unknown override files if it's possible for there to be simple overrides, because it's only possible for this to happen when there's an unpacked and a packed folder. So in that case, we can do what we were already doing, right? Then we can say if self.unknown overrides is not none, return self.unknown overrides to return the cached version, right? Then we can say the base list is equal to self.package contents. Oh, nope, package contents. And the over list is equal to self.unpacked contents. Now, theoretically, I could perhaps also do this by asking for the list of overrides, and it would sort of, well, it would fill out the overrides file, but it wouldn't fill out necessarily the contents. It might, but we can look at that in a minute. Now, I think we want to say self.unknown overrides is equal to, what files do we actually want here? The list of base files, the base list, but not files that exist in the override file overlist. Oh, I cannot. There we go. If base list is the list of files that exist in the package and you subtract away from that the files that exist in the unpacked folder, then anything that's left, I think, should be what we expect to see there. Just the files in the override list that don't exist in the base, which is what the files we're talking about, right? But in order to determine that, we need to have an example of that happening for one thing. Oh, and I'm going to do that thing where I open a console in a new window and then zoom it over, whoa, to this desktop over here like this so that I can see what it's doing, and I'll pin it to the, like so. Hello, Liam. I am indeed a mega nerd. That's why I have the name. You have a GTX 1080? I'm not exactly sure what graphics card I have in this, to be perfectly honest, although I did have the case side off the other day so that I could verify that the fans inside were in fact not the problem at all, and it was the other server and its super noisy power supply that was causing the noise and the vibrations on my desk. That was a big drag. That's what that was. If we need a sample package, which one should we fiddle with here? Are you a Sublime Text user, Liam? Let's say the default package because it's right up there at the top. So I'll open a console and we can, actually I probably could have put just a file in there, couldn't I? I'll touch sample.txt in that particular file, like so. Now, though, if we refresh that, nothing as exciting is going to happen, of course. Now, here's where it gets tricky. From override audit dot source dot packages import package info. Oops. What is the actual namespace on this thing? Oh, lib. My bad. Lib packages. Boop. There we go. So if I said x was equal to, oh, actually, I might even do that this way. So now I have the information for the default package, and we can see right there it's a shipped package with unpacked files. And if I picked x dot package contents, there's a lot of files that exist in that particular thing, of course. And if I said x dot unpacked content, I should see just those two files because those are the only two that exist inside of the actual package itself. And if I asked for files, defaults to simple, we get to see paste from history because that's something that appears in both lists. As a matter of fact, we can see it right there in the list of packages up there and right there in the list of files in the unpacked package. The real magic is what if I searched for unknown override files? No attribute unknown oh, maybe I need to do that first. I may not have reloaded that as much as I thought I should. No, huh? Maybe I need to do that. Now again, it's been a while since I worked on this particular aspect of this thing. Am I not calling it right? Oh, no, I'm just not calling it right because I'm a moron. I probably should rename it to be more like the other one. Oh, sorry. Oh no, it should be unknown override files. Is that not what I was doing? Let's just double check that I actually copied and pasted that correctly. Okay, well, that's clearly not the right order for that. There's a 50-50 chance to get these things. Over list minus base list. Come up with a, let's try this again. I'm going to save just that one. That should cause everything in the module to reload. So if I did that, global name unknown overrides. Oh, I fuddled that up, didn't I? I need to do that. That's probably my problem. I'm going to cut that out and then do this so that, there we go. So again, just to verify, if I said x dot override files, we end up with that file. And if we do x dot the other thing, unknown override files, we get the opposite of the one of the two files that's in there if we said package files, I think, or was it the other one? Unpacked contents. Boy, that's only slightly off, huh? That's both of the files. So that seems to do what one might expect it to do. Let's go ahead and zoom in on that. And do we want to really change anything here? Maybe we check it over in this one to just verify the changes that we've made and that the names seem to make sense. So we added a new member variable for what the unknown overrides are, which is not a dictionary like the simple and expired overrides are, because those need to work for both simple and complex overrides, but unknown overrides can only ever be simple. Next, we have a new unknown override files that only does something if it's possible for that to have something. We should double check that. And if it has captured the data before, it returns that value, which I think was one of the problems we were having before. It gets those two items and it does that. Now, one thing we should, of course, immediately check here is if I said, let's say y equals package info, and the package was, well, something that doesn't appear in this list. So let's say ASP just has shipped packages. So if I said y dot unpacked contents, should get nothing, right? No data in that one. And if we asked it for its unknown override files, it should also be an empty list with no problems, like so. Well, that's actually a list and not a, we'll double check that one. But it returns package file set, which is what the other one returns. That might just be, oh, sorry, that was actually returning a list of files. Yeah, my bad. Okay. So now the question becomes, if I asked for unpacked contents like thus, I think this is already sort of pre-cached. Get package contents is defined here. Yeah, self package content file name equals result, which it already caches. So there's no problem with us using either of these two calls, because if we call this, it's going to cache the package contents and the unpacked package contents into the appropriate values and then just reuse them here. And if we do this one first, it'll reuse them here. So we don't have to worry about that. One of the things that when I was developing this was ensuring that it's as fast and performant as possible. So I think this handles part one here, which is including the ability to find non-overrides, which are files that appear in Sublime Package but not in the unpacked folder, which should be an empty list when we have no packed package. That really looks like it's kind of doing what we want there. So let's go ahead and just double check. We added unknown overrides. We'll stage that hunk. We added unknown override files, which, as we can see here, if we zoom this up a little bit, matches override files, but it's unknown override files. It does what we want it to do, so we're going to stage that hunk. Now everything is staged, so the message for this might be something like include the ability to capture unknown overrides. And we go ahead and commit that bad boy. Now the next thing on our list of things to do is update the syntax to support unknown overrides. And of course we all know that syntaxes are scary. Let's go ahead and zoom that back out, and we'll work in this one, bring this sidebar back. And I can't remember how many syntaxes. I believe this might appear in multiples. I think the diff is literally just, no, no, that might actually be in more than one place. That is some action right there. So let's say we actually do a little bit of this. And I can now copy this. This would actually be called what? Sample.txt in our little thing. And it would have a question mark in front of it like this to let us know that this is something that is unknown. Now, maybe we will throw that down in here. So an override report definitely has that. An expired override report has the same, only shows expired overrides, but it uses the same syntax. It just changes what it writes. So that's okay. If we bulk diffed a single package and that package was default, we would see the same thing here. So I think we would also need to fiddle this one as well. And I would imagine in this case, we might see something like this. We might see, whoops, a question mark and then sample.txt. And then, well, actually, no, it wouldn't show up in the diff, would it? An unknown package can't, or an unknown override can't show up in a diff because there's nothing to diff against. I said that part at the beginning, so we don't care about that. That's good. What else is there? It's not going to appear in a package report, and it's definitely not going to appear again in those bulks. So I think it's just the override report that needs to have this particular stuff. So that's this syntax right here. And let's zoom that out just a little bit. Note the incredible easiness of this particular operation. So I would imagine something as simple as this. And as a matter of fact, maybe we want to do that so we can see that change. If this was a $sign, and I believe we have to do that so we know it's special. Override begin meta dot override dot unknown keyword dot control dot unknown file name dot override dot unknown. Boop. And I believe what's actually making it do that is the keyword dot control dot unknown for, let's see, what are the captures here? Okay, so that's the beginning of the override, which is the tick and the dash. So this part is the actual that thing. Yeah, keyword control is something that ends up being read in this case. So maybe we could even just throw comment on as an example of what we could do. We could say comment here, and then those would have that to visually distinctivize them. Distinction. They'd look different than the other ones because those ones are red, and that color might show that up for you. And if we did this, we can see that that is entity name, file name, override unknown. So that's nice. And I think this whole line should have text override audit override report. Meta override unknown is starting from there all the way to the last character, like so. And if that was something we were going to do, then what we also need to do is open this and find a place where we're seeing one of these. Now let's just look at this for a second. This is a syntax test, which you can use when you're creating a syntax to be able to verify that it works the way you expect it to work. Of course, we know that the syntax itself applies scopes to each of the character positions. The syntax test allows you to verify that positions in the item here have exactly the scope that you expected them to have. And then as you make modifications, you can verify. Now I think, notice up here, we're just using comment for that. I like the idea of using that. Now, how are these different? I'm not entirely sure why. Oh, because this one has a space in it and this one has a dot in it. Um, yeah, okay. We're gonna, I want to verify all of these to be the same. Um, yeah, I mean, technically, I don't know that it's super necessary, but we do like to be. Okay, so I'm gonna do that. Okay, and I'm gonna. Oh wow, that totally busted some stuff here, did it? Oh, I see. That's why there's no new lines there. Okay, and we're going to copy this one as well. And we're going to make that one of these. And we're also going to do this one. Now, this was actually a bug fix that was made. Well, I guess that's probably okay. Because there was a regular expression for detecting what files are package files. And it was sort of going a little doolally, if you will. Now, I don't know if it makes sense to actually make the entire file name look like a comment instead of just that heading at the beginning. I don't know. I mean, that's easy enough to do. And incidentally, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but I am using package dev. Highly recommend this thing, whether you're a package developer or not. It provides some awesome syntax highlighting for things like key bindings and your settings, and if for no other reason, install it just for that. But it's got so much more cool stuff for package developers. And one of the things I really like about it when I'm working with syntax is this, the visual distinction as I'm moving through each of these rules that says that those two things should be punctuation.override.begin. It shows with the region exactly where they are, so you can be sure they all line up the way you expect. Now, if I push Control B here, we should see all kinds of failures here. And we can actually, jump right into that. Now, yeah, is this expired? No, it's not expired at all, is it? That's not expired, and that other one's not expired. These ones are actually unknown. And similarly, that and that are both also unknown. Now there's still other problems with this. Actually, yeah. Whoops. I should probably spell it right, huh? If I do that and build, there are still some errors here. What did I get wrong now? Okay, this one is still wrong on line 114. Oh, sorry. Position 6, which is probably this, because that is still not expired even now. It's still unknown, I think. And now all of the assertions pass. So we know that our syntax seems to work the way that we want it to work. Now again, we could come over here and I could change, I think if I change this from entity name, file name, override unknown, I wonder if I just threw a comment on the end. That will do that. I'm not 100% sure that that would work everywhere. Oh, no. Go away now. See, it's still providing options where it shouldn't, but that's neither here nor there. It's probably something we could fix. Is it nicer to have that all commented out? I don't know that I necessarily like that, so we'll just leave it like this for now. And that seems to do what we want. So now we know that we can detect when there are unknown override files, and we're going to leave that right there because we're going to need it in a minute. And we know the syntax will, if we generate them with the question mark at the front, it will show them with that. And again, those do have the scope that we expect them to have. So we can close the syntax and close that and come over here, and now we can say, well, what we have going on here is a new match. And again, we can just double check that inside of a package row. If you find any amount of the start of the line, any amount of white space, then those two characters, then an X, then some stuff, that is going to be an expired override. If you see the exact same thing but with a question mark, that's an unknown override. And if you see that text followed by a space followed by anything else, that's just a regular override. And I believe there's an edge here that we can roll down to see that that does get entity file name override. These items, the braces there, are metascoped so that the code that, if you remember back at the beginning when I freshened the override and the X went away because it was no longer expired, those need to be metascoped so that the thing can actually find them in there. So that seems like that's probably good. So let's stage that. And then here, again, just to verify, because we thought it was necessary in the past to have rules to test expired overrides with and without spaces in the name and with a leading period in the name, we're doing the same thing here so that anything we thought was a valid override before is still a valid override now. And we can stage that one as well. And now we can say update the syntax to highlight unknown overrides. And as I said, we can tweak how that is presented later on, like so. And now that brings us to me scrolling that console all the way to the bottom. And if we come in here, that brings us to this one, update the report generation to also include unknowns. We want to do this only for normal reports for now. The alternate to that, and again, if I did this just to see one over here, oh, well, it's going to reuse that view, isn't it? So this is just a standard override report. We could also do a override report for expired only, and in that case, it only shows you entries where the item is marked with the X to include something as expired. And these, we'll see, there aren't any here. This kind of report is automatically generated every time a package is unignored after it's being updated. It does Override audit will scan to see if there are expired overrides and immediately pop one of these up. And after Sublime itself updates, it does the same thing in case you have overrides on base packages. And in that case, it also shows only expired overrides, but those reports only pop up if it actually finds something. I'm saying for right now, I don't know that we want to put that in the expired override report, just because if there was something in there, it would just constantly warn you about it when you maybe didn't care about it. For example, in the case where I just had that sample.txt file in default, maybe I was working on something. I don't care if that's there. I don't need it to complain to me every time it does something. So for right now, we're just going to keep it into the override audit report or the override report, and not the expired only version of that report. Um, so now let's go ahead and trace what this is doing. This is the thread that does the bulk of the work, and here's the command that actually you would invoke: override audit, override report command. It creates a thread where the spinner says generating override report, and it has to fetch the list of all of the packages and figure out everything. That is a non-zero sum. Remember, when you run a command, the run until run exits, the UI in Sublime is hung. So you don't want to do a lengthy operation, or when you pick override report, suddenly you can't interact with the window and it's just frozen. And if you have 500 packages that all have 1,000 files in them, and each one of those 1,000 files, 500 of them is unpacked, and it's got to figure out every single one and what their relative timestamps are, that's going to take more than no milliseconds, and a frozen UI is never good for anybody. So all of the commands in override audit spawn a thread in the background, all the ones that do that sort of thing anyway, which allows them to do a bunch of stuff. So as we can see now, there is a report generation thread, and we could actually jump there to see the base of what this is doing. And the base of what this is doing is a background worker thread, which again is something that is stashed here in the library of threads. And this is the thing that adds a spinner text, gathers the list of packages or whatever you told it to do. It calls process, and once it's done, it displays that result. So that's what this is doing. It's basing its item on that, and its process is doing the generation of the actual report itself. Excuse me. Knowing when the report was generated and actually invoking the thing for getting the contents. So when it comes to generating override reports, here's our process for when you run an override report, because obviously this is going to get invoked first, right? So it gets the list of every package, figures out which one it should ignore overrides in, and whether or not it should ignore only expired is an argument that says that whether it should generate a report for expired overrides only or all overrides. And ignore empty, you can set that to true. And in the specific case of you've used only expired true, if ignore empty is true and there aren't any expired overrides, no report is generated. You don't need to see that. It just displays something in the status bar here and in the console that says no packages with expired overrides found. This is where we figure out the title. Then we also append that text. If this is an expired only report, we append the generation time, which, as we just saw, is something that we don't need to catch ourselves. Now, for the package name, package info, and package list, if package name isn't ignored, output the results of that package. Then we can either say we didn't do anything. Sorry, if we didn't display anything, then if we were told to ignore the empty thing, then just do nothing. Otherwise, insert a message that says, hey, there's nothing in here. This is the stuff that actually sets the content, because all reports work in a similar way. They have settings in the background that tells you what kind of report they are so that the code for refreshing a report knows that it's being executed in a report view. It has a title, it has a syntax, it has its actual report contents. Output package is where we're actually saying shipped overrides has possible overrides, normal override. Okay, let's see. Let's double check this. Let's see. Shipped override equals has possible simple overrides false, and normal overrides is the list of override files for simple equals true. Expired overrides files for simple is true, and expired package for simple is false. Now, that is to cover the case where if well, I can show you that if anybody cares. But essentially, again, as I said, a simple override is I want to modify the contents of this file in default, so I make a new package folder named default in my packages folder, put a file of the identical name in there. That's a simple override. That's an unpacked file in a folder with the same name as the Sublime package. That's a simple override. That's this, the list of normal overrides, and that is also this, the list of expired overrides that are simple. What you can also do, of course, as I said, is if you put a file named python.sublime package in the installed packages folder, because there's a shipped package by the same name, you will completely override the shipped Python, and Sublime will only use your version. So for example, if you put an empty zip file there, you've completely eradicated all Python support, all syntaxes, all plugins that are for working with Python, all snippets, everything. The package is considered to be empty. And that is what this is doing when simple is false. It needs to know if there can be a shipped override, and if it is, it needs to know if the package has expired, which is what is used to check there. Now, there's no need to do anything if there are no overrides at all, so it can just leave. And if we're told to only display expired and there aren't expired overrides and this isn't an expired package, we can also leave. Otherwise, we need to append to this name of this package to the list of packages with expired overrides, which I'm not 100% sure what that's doing. We output it by decorating it, and then we output normal overrides like that, and that's what this part is doing. Now, must be overrides. Okay, so if there aren't any overrides, you say there's no simple overrides found. If if you were told to display only expired and there aren't any expired, you say there's none. Otherwise, this is the part that's kind of funky. For item in expired, if only expired, else overrides, it dumps them all out. And it needs to add the appropriate prefix. So this is sort of exciting. This is so exciting that I am going to mute the microphone and finish this coffee because I'm going to need all the caffeine I can get to make sure I'm doing this right. Chug-a-lug. Okay. Shipped override has possible override. This is normal overrides. That's expired overrides. We also want to say unknown overrides is equal to package info dot that thing that I know I'm going to forget. This. Right? And we don't need to pass a parameter there because, as I said, it always assumes that simple overrides is the case there. There's no need to do anything if there are no overrides at all. If there aren't normal overrides and they're not shipped overrides and not unknown overrides, then return false. If we were told to only display expired and there's not expired and there's not an expired package, return false. We don't have to do anything there. One might also conceive that we don't necessarily need to capture the list of expired overrides in that case, but I believe I tried that and it didn't work. If expired overrides. Now here is what is this for? I think Where is output package being called? It's being called right here. It captures the list of expired packages. Oh, that's right. I think there's actually a setting that is applied to the thing so that it knows. That I remember this now. Okay. Would that be the actual setting though? Let's see. It's empty list. Absolutely perfect. So the idea of this is the context menu for a package. When I right click, none of these have that option that we saw earlier, which was to freshen an expired package. The thing knows that this, if you will, another way to put this is the syntax works in a top-down fashion. So this knows that this is a package that's enabled, and it only knows it's enabled because it's not wrapped in square brackets, which would cause it to be disabled. Then it moves on to this. Now, if paste from history was expired, there's no way for the syntax to know when it processes this line because as the syntax is applied one line at a time from the top down and you don't have access to state above you. Or if you will, when we get here and we know that this is expired, there's no way to go back in time and change this. So the report generator for overrides inserts into this a setting override audit expired packages that's the list of all the packages who are found to contain expired packages, and then when I right click on this and it looks up the package name, it knows what it should actually be doing with that thing. That's why that works that way. So that is also nothing we particularly care about here. So verifying again that in the override report thread, what changed here? What did I do here? Oh, I joined that line when I didn't mean to. Okay. Well, we can fix that, can't we? That's supposed to look like that. Okay. And then here we captured the list of unknown overrides. There's nothing need to do with that. So this now says we don't need to do anything if there are no overrides at all, or no shipped overrides, or no unknown overrides. Do nothing. If there's expired overrides, record the name of this package. Append the decorated name of the package. And the decorated name of the package is just this, the name of the package with this decoration for whether it's shipped, installed, as we can see in HyperHelp, or unpacked. Then it actually outputs them. So now normal, expired, and let's say unknown, and that, and those won't fit, will they? No, they won't. But if we wanted it to be on 2 lines, maybe we wanted to do a little something like that. Yeah, we'll go with that. Really digging this new, mini diff support. I mean, I've always liked the indication there, being able to skip back and forth through the file with these key bindings is great, because previously with Git Gutter that only worked for me in one direction because I was using a package that masked the binding that goes backwards and I was too lazy to fix it. So now we're getting the result, we're getting overrides, we're getting expired, we need unknown, and we'll let that one hang over the edge for now. If there aren't any overrides, there's no simple overrides found. There must be overrides if we get this far, so if none of them are expired, use a different message. So if we were specifically told only to display expired, and there aren't any, then say that. And then this is what actually outputs them into the thing. Now, for item in expired, if only expired, else overrides. So here's a little bit of how does this work? The list of overrides is every override, which is I would imagine sorted, but I'm not entirely sure. Should we check that? The list of expired overrides is also just a list of files that are considered to be expired. So it can always iterate over the list of overrides, and then it can know which prefix to apply depending on which list it appears in. So let's go ahead and check here first. Whoops. Ah, there we go. Over here, zoom that one up. Now, what was I actually going to check here? Expired override files. I was curious if there's more work that has to be done there for that. I was curious if this actually returns something that is sorted. I can't imagine that it necessarily would. Iter self.content.values. So, well, that's something we can worry about later, I suppose. So what we need to do here, what's the magic for joining two lists together? Let's do a little web search on that because it seems like something I should probably be familiar with. Boop. Oh, I made my console all noise on top and now I can't see anything. Python iterate over multiple lists. I'm imagining, oh, not in parallel. Sequentially, an elegant and fast way to consecutively iterate over two or more lists. Now, I don't know that that's actually... Oh, Stack Overflow is currently offline for maintenance. This is exactly the thing that is not required during my live stream, Stack Overflow. Whoops. Absolutely not. That is pretty clever, though. All right. Well, I'm going to say that we're going to say, does it matter if we modify the list of overrides? I think is what we care about here. We're told to output a package. We capture the normal overrides. I really don't like the idea of, let's try this. If x is equal to a and y is equal to b, then if z is equal to list x dot extend y, then z is nothing, huh? Nope, not update. How about that? Okay, that's x is definitely a, and y is definitely b. And so, oh, maybe I can't do it that way. Z dot extend b. No? Oh, sorry. Y. There we go. So you can't do it all in line. That's unfortunate. But we'll go ahead and do it that way anyway. Just for now, and again, like I say, we can always come back. Dot extend unknown. Now they're not going to be sorted. For item in, I'm going to do that just to see what it does. Now I think with that in place, do we get any weird errors in the console? I got to open my console here to see. Oh, I suppose I should probably reload the package, huh? There, now it's including sample.txt. It's even including it in the right place. Let's go ahead and just to see. package cd default touch a.py, let's say. Look, it's loaded default plugin A. So now if I came over here, it's definitely put that in the right order. Now, again, I'm guessing maybe the list of items in the package file set, which isn't, oh, it's an ordered dictionary. So I went out of my way. I went out of my way to do it that way. So if I take this sorted out, I'm guessing we get that, and then we get those things in an unfortunate way. So we probably want that. Oh, sure. Reload the package, reload the report, and we get that. So we're most of the way there now. I mean, this is going to cause a problem because if I try to diff it, it can't find it, and well, I could edit it if I wanted, but it has nothing in it. So that's less interesting than it could be. So I guess the real, issue now is this thing. The other way that this could be done is to list all of the files in the list of overrides. But I think up until now, it's been going out of its way to exclude, to only calculate this based on the list of files that are in the upper package, because that's what an override is. So I don't like the idea of making the list of overrides that you ask for just automatically include everything, even if it's unknown, because that puts the onus on someone to figure out that they're not actually overrides. The distinction is different for things that are expired overrides because it's still an override. It just has extra state. This is not actually an override, and it has extra state. The format is equal to that if item is not in expired, else that, oh, sorry. It's regular if the item is not in the list of expired items, else let's go ahead and copy that. Whoops. If item not in unknown, hey, it's ugly, but it compiles. And we get anything if we go over here? Nope. Oh yeah, because that's not going to work, is it? And that part needs to be last. Okay, so that's not the way to do that. If it's not an expired, of course it's going to be that. Let's try it this way. And again, is there more Pythonic ways to do this? If item in expired, then the format is equal to, with an X, elif item in unknown, then the format is equal to that, but now it has a question mark. Then we reload that and reload that, and boop. Hey, look, that's totally telling me that context.py is totally something that's not actually an override. That's interesting. So that is kind of doing what we want. I don't know what the fancier way to pull that off is, though, mind you. Is there even a fancier way to pull that off? If we come back to this, now that we know we have something that works, we can, if we want, spend some time making it cooler, right? So item for item in X. No, wait, that's just going to give us the contents of X, right? This is where that whole join thing is. Yeah, so let's not worry about that per se. Again, this doesn't necessarily need to do that. I could just say overrides.extend unknown, but that does cause this list of overrides to be modified by this call, which is possibly not what it's expecting to have happen. So I don't like to do that if I can help it. I don't know how smart list creation like this is. I mean, it has to copy some amounts of memory, I would imagine, right? Is that something that even matters? Am I letting my old manness shine through on me here? So, wow, I got these sorts of files all over the place. I must have added one there for some other reason. Let's edit that one. Do I have anything in that one? Look, that one's a sample. I'm going to copy that text from that file, and then I'm going to come up and put it into this file. Yeah, that seems cool. Not that that really has any effect on anything. So now we have done that. Update report generation to also include unknowns. We want to do this only for normal reports for now and ensure that they sort into the appropriate position, which we already verified. Unfortunately, they won't. And again, could sort of fix that. Um, but overrides are used for more than just the override report. They're also used in the bulk diff, and it would cause errors in the bulk diff if it got the list of overrides and then some of them weren't overrides. And it seems dumb to make that we modify code everywhere to know if something is actually an override or not. I really don't like the design implications of that as much as I kind of don't like having to manually sort this thing. Now, I guess the other thing we might want to know is it sorting these into the same order they were before? I think we might want some sort of path sort type operation in there, which again, I believe I have already worked out. Bam, user OA test browse. Does that have something in it? I can actually re-enable these now that Override Audit 2 is officially released. I think there is a something in here that actually explodes files like this. Yeah. Sorted files key equals lambda. This is something that I could put into this to ensure that these items all sort appropriately, which they may or may not be now. But that's something that we can worry about as an enhancement a little bit later on. So we have done number 3. So let's just go ahead and continue with that, and we'll verify here. What did we do? We captured the list of unknown overrides. Oh, well, let's look at that. Is there anything to be done about this? I mean, I guess we could do this. Does anyone think this looks more readable than the other thing? Just so that it doesn't go off the right-hand 80 columns there. I'm all for, to some degree, trying to comply with what other people think is pleasing looks in code, but not at the expense of readability. Like, I really don't want to have to split this onto 2 lines just because that's a few characters longer. So we're not going to worry about that here. But if we were to verify, we can just, oops, zoop that like so. We got the list of unknown files. We verify that there are not unknowns. We modify the call. We duplicate the override list and output it with an appropriate prefix. Let's It's going to be two set tests no matter what, I would think. Maybe there's a cleverer way to blap that stuff out, but I never claimed to be clever. Okay, and see, include unknown overrides in the override report. And now that aspect is done. And the last thing we had here was update the context handlers because unknown overrides can't be diffed because there's no underlying file and it makes no sense to freshen them, which I don't think it would care about anyway. Because the list of expired overrides, if we were to look at, and this is another reason not to fiddle faddle with code that works perfectly fine. The expired override files, if there are no possible simple overrides, there aren't any. If we've already calculated it, return it, create a set. If it's not simple, then it just needs to immediately compare the last modified time of the shipped package versus the installed package to know if the complete override is out of date. Otherwise, it needs to get the base path of the local file and the list of, or where the local package would be, I should say, the list of overrides, which as we already know is as simple overrides is just going to be files that exist in the package, and then it compares the time in the zip entry with the current local time and adds them. So there's no way for an unknown override to ever be expired, so we never need to worry about it trying to be freshened. So that's cool. I believe the freshen code is even smart enough if you freshen the whole package, even if it did try to freshen everything, it would just touch all the files and it doesn't care about the state. We will, of course, test that aspect of it. So that part doesn't matter. So all that really does matter is you shouldn't be able to diff this file because there's no way for that part to actually happen. So the appropriate thing for that, I believe, is the diff, not delete override, not diff override. This one here. Now again, that's no big whoop. Now, okay. When is this visible? If it's always supposed to be visible, blah blah. View context has target is diff and has diff else true. Okay, so when is this enabled? We get the view context. So we need to verify what view context, well, I mean, I know what view context does, but what extra logic one might have to place in it. Notice you can only diff if the override actually exists. So yeah, this is actually kind of interesting. Let's go and check this out. Now, again, I have recollections of what this actually does. There's a particular context. I wonder if I can, like so. Okay, that's in the core too, right? A custom name tuple that's used by the context helper class to describe the context a command is being executed in. So it knows what package the command is being executed in. It knows what override it's operating on. It knows if this is a diff or not. It knows what the source of this is, which basically means what the source of the command was. And we'll look at how that's actually invoked in just a moment. When we look at the other part, but see we get package override is diff source, and then there's extra methods in here. Does the command have a target? It has a target if there is a package and there is an override. So if you right click on just if there's no package defined or there's no override defined or both, it doesn't have a target to run on. Package only tells you if it has a package and not an override, is complete. Knows if it has package override and is diff. Now, is diff is a thing that you see when you open an override file. It knows whether it's currently a diff or not, so it knows if it can toggle between them, I think is the magic of that. but the actual reference to this is here, where this is what gets invoked for all commands that need to know how they're being invoked, because there are several ways a command can be invoked. It could be invoked directly as a key binding. It could be on the context menu. It could be up here in the tab. For files that are actually open that are overrides, which is it needs different stuff to get at, because this is still the current view when I right click over here. So I need to know if I'm being invoked from a tab context menu so that I know how to look that stuff up to know what file it's actually referring to. And there's various information. So if there isn't any view, then that gets the view target, which it looks it up based on the current view, which, as we can see, just finds the window that the view is in, and if isn't in a group, then it figures out what group it's in. This is the part where group equals -1 in this particular thing will be the case when you do this. Okay. Now, what we say here is what are the ways we could get um, the different settings for this. So if the key, package name, package, or override, if any of those are in the list of keyword arguments that were provided, then that means that we can get the package name from the actual keyword arguments, either of those two names, because one of them is internal and one's not. And then the override is the override, and isdiff is isdiff, and the source of that is args, which means if you specifically supply any command with arguments to tell it exactly what package name and override it should work on, it will always use that no matter what, which is what you want if you created a key binding or a menu entry, right? Next, for non-expired items, it tries to pull them out of the settings of the view instead. Now, this happens for overrides. They have a setting in them that knows what package they're for, so that when you hit the key to swap between a diff and a file, it can immediately tell, and that's set up when the file is loaded. And then after that, context clicks on a package or override file name as a callback. That's what happens when you right click on a file like so. This is the context action, in which case it gets the event, which tells it where it is. It figures out if there's a package there, and if there isn't, it looks to see if there's an override there, and if there's not, it looks to see if there's an override for that, or sorry, if override isn't none, then it looks for a package. Let's see, if package is none, it looks for a package at that point. If it doesn't find it, it looks for an override at that point. And if that's not it, it looks for a package for the override at, which I believe would trigger for a shipped package, if I had to guess. And then it returns a context. So this is being invoked like this. Let's go ahead and copy that and jump over to, well, actually, no, let's not do that. Let's go ahead and scooch that over to there so we can look at that. So we're saying view context none for the view, and expired is false. I believe that is whether or not you want this to work on something that's expired or not. And then the rest of the keyword arguments, where event will default to none unless it was provided, and it will be provided if you actually right click inside the buffer. How do we want to handle this is the question. This might be a little more in depth than I originally thought. Let us quickly check this. Check for overrides after you save, after you load. On close, view settings get the diff base. If the temp base isn't none, delete oh yeah, right. This is when you diff externally. Um, if you do it in a way where you're using Sublime or some tool that does the diff directly in Sublime, then this setting is applied to that view. So when you close it, it can delete the packed override if possible. So check for overrides happens whenever you save a file or whenever you load a file so that it knows if the file you're editing is actually an overrides, which is what this is. So it gets a file name. If it's none or it's not a file, then leave. Check potential override, which is something we need to worry about here. I think um, may, I think this would say, see, if file name starts with packages path, if it doesn't start with packages path, it can't possibly be an override. Otherwise, it gets relative to the path, and then it needs to look to see if that is inside. So I think that this kind of automatically does what we want. Now we do need to look at override group here. Can I find that here? Over group. I mean, I know kind of what it's doing. It's a settings group is what it is. It's this thing, which is just a simple way to cram a bunch of settings in all at once. But where is this actually referenced? In the core. There, here it is. Override audit package, override audit, override audit diff. So for example, if I was to edit this, if I said view.settings.get override audit package like this, it will tell me that this file is in the hyperhelp package. And similarly, if I looked for override, it would tell me that the name of the override is that. And if I said diff, it would return false. If I came over here and did Alt-O to swap it, now that this is the view, it's still hyperhelp. It's now a diff where it wasn't before, and the override is still the same, which is what one might expect to happen because this actually is an override. Now, if I was to edit the override context.py in this particular package, if I check, does it have a package? No, because it's not an override. Does it have an override? No, because it's not an override. Is it a diff? No, because it's not an override. That's what that is doing there. So that part's all okay. So it all comes down to what the don't need that file any longer. We don't care about that one any longer. What we care about is this. If self override exists, where is that enabled? I believe that's in the base class for context helper. Yeah. I imagine if we look, we'll see this command is derived from context helper because all the context sensitive commands need to do stuff like this. You might need to extract something from a point in the buffer. You need to know if there's a package at a point, if there's an override at a point, package for override at. Oh, that's right. Okay. I remember what package for override at does now. That is so that if you do this, and you want to know what package this line is associated with, it can know that it's hyperhelp, and it can know that it's hyperhelp by capturing the names of all of the packages and seeing which one it comes after while being before everything else. That's what that one's doing. Now, all reports have this report type setting. So for example, if I did this, we can see that this is a report type for overrides, so that anything that it wants to work with a override report can tell that that's what it's looking at. Package contains expired. Well, it needs to get the view, then it needs to get the setting that says what packages are expired and then checks to see. So if you want to know is makefile expired, it needs to examine that setting that it created when we generated the report. View target says if you get the window for the current view for the view that was passed in, and then if it, return that if the group is -1, otherwise find the window in the appropriate group. And that's for other things to work. View context does all of that stuff, always visible. Override exists. If context has target, it needs to see if that override exists. So what we also need to know, I guess, is uh, if this override is quote unquote unknown. So let's try this. Def override unknown. Self context. We have to know if it has a target. I'm not sure what the good way to do this is. Maybe this might be the reason why I didn't do this before. The only way to know that this override is an extra unknown override is to have the information about the package, and that information existed when we created this thing, but then it didn't exist anymore. So I think what we want to do is fiddle with the override report generation again. And in particular, in the same way that this gathers the list of all of the packages with expired things, and then up here it applies that. I think we also want to do that for all overrides that are extra. And then if we need to know, we can look it up based on the state that this report was generated in, and we don't have to constantly scan the hard drive for things. So that would be a dictionary. Can a dictionary be added as a setting? Settings.set test and view.settings.get. I mean, I assume, yeah, that would probably work just fine. That's, I mean, that's probably what, no, this one's a list, isn't it? I'm going to do this just because I can. Override, audit, unknown overrides. Unknown over. Oh, I can actually capture that. Can I capture that here? We'll do that. Okay, now that means we also need up here and unknown files is equal to dictionary, like that. And where we pass expired packages, we also pass unknown files like so, which is in self.output package. And here we capture that thing. So we could say for unknown, does that appear anywhere else in here? No. For unknown in unknown overrides. Oh, we also have to expect a parameter here, don't we? Like, whoops. Now we're really stretching the bounds of credulity here with the length of these things. Excuse me, need a little bit of water. Okay. Now, is it safe to put this here? Yes, because if it's down here, this is where it's actually generating the report, right? Theoretically, it doesn't need to do this if it was told to only display only expired things, because, yeah, well, we can worry about that in a second. Oh, I guess that could just be a list, couldn't it? No, I want it to be dictionary so that I can key it based on the package that it's contained in. So we have package info, right? Do. We'll just create some names here, and we'll say A is equal to unknown files dot get package info dot name, and with the default of none. If A is none, then A is equal to a new list and unknown files dot package info dot name is equal to A, and then A dot, oh, actually, this is a single package, isn't it? That part doesn't have to happen inside the loop. It's only ever going to be one. So we can do this part up here. We could just say A dot append unknown overrides, I would imagine. Probably be enough to get that out, right? It doesn't need to pass it to output overrides because that doesn't care. When it comes back up, it's filled out. What did I do over here? Well, yeah, I guess that's there, but we don't care about it at the moment. That still loads. So, what was the name of that setting that I just fiddled with? If I said this should get nothing, like literally nothing. Once I reload, it blows up because value is expected in set value settings set. So I did something, I boned something up here. Let's double check what we did here. When you call process unknown files is an empty dictionary. It passes it that's the same as that thing, right? Double check. That is there. It passes it to unknown things in the output package. And here, A is equal to unknown files get package info name default to none. If A is none, then A is a new list. Add it to unknown files package info dot name equals that. Then append. Let's go ahead and print A at this point. And just so we can see what the console is doing here. Good gravy. This is really quite absurd. I'll do that. An empty. Not gonna lie, kind of confused that that is a list of lists because I used append and not extend, which is what I should have done. I mean, do I even need to extend it? I could just add the damn thing in, couldn't I? It's only ever going to be one of them anyway. I'm probably really overthinking this whole operation. Package info, no, sorry. Unknown files package info dot name is equal to unknown overrides. That doesn't even need to be inside this thing, except this is what's capturing them. Let's do that. What does that do? Well, that's still unhappy. Print unknown files. Whoops. Unknown files. Thank you. Let's see. Oh, look at the first default contains a.py and sample.txt. That one contains nothing. That one, okay. So that seems like it's doing what we want right until it gets out. If unknown overrides do that, then we don't fill the thing up with a bunch of settings that don't mean squat. Well, let's clear that so we can actually see it working. Now, defaults lists and then hyperhelp lists. So that's probably what we want, so we can get rid of that. Let's say we don't have to print it either. So that's nice. So now the only problem is this. A value is required. What have I... Oh. There it's actually set to something. Now, just as a test, if I did this, does this still work? Because maybe that code in there is smarter than I think it is. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Okay, so that works. So the real problem is that when we invoke that thing that it is, unknown files is what we get. We pass to there in output package. It's really at a loss for why that might be the case. Let's put that back. Reload. Is it the definition of lunacy to expect a different result? I'm going to do that so I can still bing that. So in set timeout, in display report, in self settings. I don't know why that would be the case. Oops, this one should have the focus. Report generation thread is in the core. Display report. This is where it's setting self.settings setting. What does it do now? setting, boop, and it's mad because I didn't test whether you can have a dictionary of lists, did I? Man, is it going to be a butthole about that? Wait, isn't that what I was doing for the other thing? No, it was just a list. Huh. Well, I mean, there's a way around this, but it's not like I like it or anything. Just to verify. Watch this fail. This works, right? Huh. Well, what the hell is it complaining about then? In display report at line 688, view settings dot set the setting and self settings setting. That type error value required really sounds an awful lot like something that I would expect to see if that setting wasn't something that was allowed. So it's definitely that first one that is getting pissed off about. View.settings.set test x. View.settings.get test. Again, that really seems like that should work. I don't know why it does not. Does this matter? Oh, yeah, I guess I need to actually recomment that line, don't I? Otherwise, I can't tell. No, it doesn't like that either. It really thinks that the value is no good. You know, for all that hardness that I expected this to have, this is not sort of what I expected to have an issue with this stupid thing. I'm not even entirely sure why I did it that way, to be perfectly honest. How about that? Well, I'm going to print setting and value there just to verify. But I'm pretty sure that's not going to work any better than it has thus far. It still says override audit, unknown overrides, and then something unhappy. Changing that to dict didn't matter, right? So I can put that back to the way it was. Why does it not like that? Oh, I think the problem is this. That's a set. It just looks like a list. Oh, that's embarrassing. How about that? Yeah, it's real happy about it now. Okay. There we go. So, son of a... Say that is okay. Well, that seems like a cooler way to do that than the way I was, so I'm going to leave well enough alone on that one. And we come over to here, and now that's that. Whoops. I'm going to copy that. Excuse me. I'm going to refresh that, and if I say view settings get this, the list of unknown things is sample and makefile, those two in default, and that in there. So that's good. Now that's doing what we expect, and this is in the override report, so we don't care about that, but what we do care about is the context helper class, because we have this method here that says, does the context contain the view? I've already forgotten. Huh. Well, of all the stuff that I thought would be handy there, view context, view, and if view is none, view is equal to that. So we're going to do that. And self and view and context. So only in that case, if view is none, that doesn't necessarily work anymore. So that's no good. So we're going to need to figure, it just has to be past a view. So we can say unknowns is equal to view.settings.get this, and just to be safe, default to an empty list. We can say if ctx.package in unknowns, and this is probably going to be a problem now because package names are case sensitive, but they only appear, I think if I remember correctly, when we capture them in the package info, we use the name of the Sublime package if there is one, and then the unpacked thing if they're not, and those blend together, but we make sure to use the package file name as the quote-unquote official one first. So if the context package is in unknowns, then we can say if ctx.override in unknowns ctx.package return true. So what do we have here? Let's see. You want to know if this override is unknown. And in order to do that, you have to pass it the actual view that this thing is going to be doing something in, and you need to pass it a context so that it knows. And if the context has a target, which it only will if it has a package and an override, then it can get the list of unknowns, defaulting to an empty dictionary if there isn't one. If the package is in the list of unknowns, then it's one of the packages that has an unknown package listed in it. If the package has an override, or sort of if the override is in the list of things that are unknown in that, then return true, otherwise return false. So override unknown seems like it would probably do what we want. Now we can come back over to here and wonder, we do need to know what the hell view this is dealing with. So we're still kind of hosed here as far as this is concerned. but we do have the keyword arguments that we need for this. So this is the thing where we can do what view context does. Now, as a matter of fact, if you pass view as none, it tries to do this. Otherwise, it just uses the view you give it. So what we actually want to do, I think, is this. View is just always that. And then here we can pass view to use whatever view it would have already gathered. And then if context has target and not self.override unknown view ctx, that. Okay, there we go. So we want to know, oh, we got to do the same thing here. That only tells you if it's visible. I may have put that in the wrong place. Let's go ahead and see what that actually does for us here. Well, the diff item isn't there anymore. It is for this one, but it's not for that one. So that's more or less what we wanted. Now, just in order to check that, context.sublime menu. If we look at diff override, always visible true, like so, then if we look here, now diff override is still enabled and you can invoke it because it's not disabled. So we also need to do the same thing here, which is that. Get the view, then the context uses that view and false and keyword args. If not self dot override unknown, I view ctx and the override exists, then we worry about that. Otherwise, it's not enabled. So now you can no longer, it knows you're not allowed to diff it. You're allowed to refresh the report. You're allowed to delete it. You're allowed to edit it. So that's all nice. Also works for that one. And for this one, it does, in fact, still work. Now, just to cover all of the bases on this, we're going to go into the package folder, go into default, and touch a.py and paste from history with a minus date of 1 year ago, like so. And we can come back and refresh this. Now, I should be able to freshen that one, right? I shouldn't be able to freshen this one because it's not an override as far as that's concerned, right? It doesn't work on that one. It doesn't work on that one because that's not even out. And up here, it does say fresh and expired overrides, and it only does that because it knows that this package has at least one thing, which is where that, whole operation that we talked about earlier about looking up a package based on an expired override comes from. I'm going to quickly zoop over to stuff is happening over in the unofficial Sublime Text Discord. Me and Randy3K discovered that you can run Sublime Text 3 under Chrome, or sorry, on a Chromebook using its Linux thing. The Penguin container does not allow you to click on phantoms, which is sort of unfortunate. Okay. Now, here's what we're going to do. We're going to clear this all up, but we're going to do that by actually picking Clear Console from the menu. Now, I'm going to freshen expired overrides here, and when it says confirm you want to do it, I'm going to say yes. And the only thing, it says it freshened default paste from history. It's the only thing that got touched. So that is no longer in the past. And if we look here, a.py March 17 of 2018. So that is totally doing what we want. And I think that is all of the items in the update context handler. So I can go ahead and actually commit that change as well. And I think that is pretty much that feature as it has been laid out. Now, that doesn't mean that it's ready for release just yet by any stretch of the imagination, because we do still want to verify how do we want this to look. Do we want that to be all commented out? That may have knock-on consequences on this. Maybe that's good. It seems to otherwise do what we want, and was fairly easy. That was, well, 2 hours and 7 minutes, but there was, a few minutes of talking about what we're going to be doing at the front, and we have finished our first potential new feature for the next edition of Override Audit. And this is going to make a lot of people happy, at least 3, I would imagine. Me, the guy that just reported this, and someone that where we were talking about this 2 years ago. So that looks all to the jiggy. So that is where we are going to call this live stream, which has been going for 2 hours and 7 minutes. That is not at all too shabby. So I'd like to thank you all for watching. Remember to subscribe to this channel for live streams on the weekly basis. And I do have another channel. I am actually in the process of recording and editing some videos to drop on there, but it is very slow going with hardly any spare time. But something should be, fingers crossed, coming there soon. I've tried to record and so I can edit several videos together. And we'll see how that all works out, because it is crazy at work. But remember, if you have any questions about anything that I worked on here, if you're like Liam Spruill and you want to know what kind of video card I have, or you have any questions on Sublime Text package development or anything else, you can drop that in the comments section below, on Twitter at OdatNurd. Find me on the unofficial Discord. Ask me a question on Reddit. Ask me a question on Stack Overflow or in the forum. Some of those places you probably want to just ask the question and generally, and I'll probably come along. But nevertheless, that is all we have for this live stream. So this is OdatNurd signing off, telling you to have a sublime day.